Hi, I'm Tim. Join me in this video as we take from the August 1973 RCM modeler, the Real Thing design, and with the help of Rudy here, recreate the Real Thing with foam board. Let's get to it. In the 1970s, 80s, up through mid-1990, RC Modeler magazine was pretty much the Bible of RC modelers. It was just a wonderful magazine, and because people built their own models back then, by and large, every issue had between 2 and 3 construction articles of models. You could see the construction article, you could order full-size plans and build it, and a lot of people did that. In the August of 1973 issue of RCM, there was a kind of tongue-in-cheek design with the Real Thing. Somebody just made a complete pretend model, a lot of straight lines, but it was a very easy to build model, and the plan sold very well. It sold so well they actually kitted it and sold additional ones from there, and that was called the Real Thing. Of course, it's not a real anything, it's just a kind of silly model. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take the actual plans from that 1973 RCM, and from that size up with foam board and build a reconstruction of the Real Thing airplane out of foam board. This is the August 1973 issue of RC Modeler magazine with the Real Thing in there. We'll scroll down, and this is what a typical construction article looked like. You'd have the title page with the author and his model, and then there'd be a series of photos and text on how to build the aircraft. Obviously, everything was built from balsa back in those days. And here is the plans, and you could purchase a full-size plans by mailing into RC Modeler magazine and building the model from there. It was a very popular way to make models at the time. So what I'm going to do in this video, and a lot of the information I referenced, plans and such, are available for download in the description, is to recreate the Real Thing, this time out of 3/16" foam board. I've used foam board in many of my models. There are some links in the description. It is 3/16 inch thick, and the boards are 20 inches by 30 inches. That dimension is important because the original Real Thing had a wingspan of about 46 inches. The foam board is 30 inches, so I've decided to make this model a 30-inch wingspan just so I don't have to connect wing halves at the center to simplify construction. Also, I am using no dihedral in this model. I did a video on dihedral. I think we can get away with it on this one. I'm still keeping it 3 channels, but I'm going to have elevator, throttle, and ailerons. The Real Thing had rudder and elevator. Back in 1973, radio systems were still very expensive. The money saved on a 3-channel system versus 2 aileron servos made the difference. But I'm going to put ailerons in there. I think it'll be easier to control on that. Just no steering on the ground, but that's okay for this model. Also, obviously, I'm going to convert it to electric flight. I'm going to use whatever motor I can find in my bin for that motor. Anticipate probably a 3-cell LiPo battery to power it, and we'll see how all that works out. So this is the plan that I printed out from RC Modeler magazine for the Real Thing. This is right from that August 1973 issue. And again, this is available for download, and I have a very complete video on how to enlarge this plan for the Real Thing using the factor method. On this one, I'm using a factor of 2.3. So in other words, when you measure this wing half, the width of this wing half on this paper is 6.5 inches. You multiply it by 2.3, you get 15 inches, which is half the wingspan. So what I did was I recreated the outlines with this factor. You can see them all listed here. And I just sketched that out onto the foam board, cut it out to make the model. This is my video on how to scale up a set of plans using the enlargement factor. I actually do it with the Real Thing. And here are the plans. You can download them from the description. I want a 15-inch for the half of the wing. I've determined from the previous video that if I measure everything on the plan, multiply by 2.3, it'll come out about right. Using the foam wing technique on this plane to build the wing in 10 minutes. This is the dimensions, all straight lines sketched out onto the foam board. The squiggle is where the foam board spars will go into place. These are the spars. I have about 1 inch wide, 2 pieces of the 3/16 inch foam board, and you just hot glue those into place an inch back from the leading edge. There's a hot glue gun that we use for this, and there's a spar glued into place. It's a single place wing. I've creased the leading edge, and you simply fold it back onto that spar, and everything works out about right. You glue it in place on the spar and at the trailing edge and trim as per the video. This is a finished wing, 30 inches in span, no dihedral. We can see on the back end the 2 spars there. It's pretty close to an airfoil shape when you look at it from the side. These are just the angles for decoration on the wingtips, and that's what they look like when they're glued in place with an end piece as well to the wing. This is the finished wing with the foam board ailerons. I think more and more with these long foam board ailerons, I'm going to use balsa. There's just too much warping with this foam with that length only 1 inch wide, but that's for future projects. Going on the fuselage, again, all straight lines, using the enlargement technique from the plans. You can sketch on former locations. Here are the 2 sides and the 2 formers, and the plywood former for the engine mount with the cutout for the rear of the mount and where the motor wires have to enter into the fuselage. All pretty standard stuff. Fuselage under construction with the firewall and the 2 formers. Note that there's a cutout at the former at the end of the cockpit, so we can bend the fuselage to come to glue it at the tail section. This is a fuselage. You can see some beefing up plywood in the front for the firewall to glue to the side and the front of the airplane. And everything's squared up, and the holes are pre-drilled for the mount. I think that's the easiest way to eventually mount your electric motor, to do everything before you install it onto the airplane. This is the top of the fuselage hatch, and we just fit that right in place on there. We'll hot glue everything in place. And there's the aft end of the fuselage with the covering there and the aforementioned reinforcement to the firewalls. I've kept the bottom open just to save a little bit of weight. Now it's time to focus on the cabin struts. Again, we measure those off the plan. These would be fairly important. A little bit of positive incidence on the wing is helpful, and we'll build that in as we do this. I use popsicle sticks for the cabin strut. They're very easy to do, fairly hard wood. They work out well. A regular dowel on top is glued to the cabin struts, and here they are. Very carefully measured, a little bit of positive incidence with a weight to hold them in place. I recommend 5-minute epoxy for putting on the cabin struts. They've got to be right. You just don't have enough time with a hot glue gun to adjust those, because the incident, you want a little bit of positive incidence for the wing. And I reinforced the struts on the outside with another set of popsicle sticks to the dowel to make sure everything is held in place with the 5-minute epoxy. Time now to take a look at the tail surfaces. Again, the stabilizer and the elevators are cut out for the dowel connector of the 2 elevator halves. Pretty standard for that. Wax paper to keep from gluing to the board. And this is a completed stab and elevator with the dowel connector to the 2 elevator halves. The wing cabin struts in place. And you see the tail surfaces are glued in place. No rudder on this, just elevator and aileron plus throttle. And here's the completed plane, just ready for a coat of paint and then perhaps a test flight. This is the fuselage so far. I've got about a Park 250 motor, I think. Check the description. I'll have to look up exactly what it is. And this is just the outline of the real thing. To keep it a very simple model, all straight lines, there's no curves anywhere. It just makes a lot of sense the way he did it. This will be a hatch for putting in the battery. Once all that is in place, the motor's screwed in. Notice I used some 1/16 inch plywood, and then I put some 1/16 inch ply on the side, epoxied it to the side to this, just to make sure we have enough strength for the firewall. The landing gear is pretty standard. It's just, we'll glue it in place, just a music wire with the wheels shown here. I used popsicle sticks for the K-bend struts for the wings. They're very handy. Popsicle sticks are hardwood. It's not balsa, it's not plywood, but it's very easy to work with, cut with an X-Acto knife. Use a couple layers of epoxy, some dowels to mount the wings on here. The plans have zero incidence on the wing. In other words, the wing is absolutely level at the top of the fuselage. All of my models, I'll put 1, 2, maybe 3 degrees of positive incidence, just the leading edge of the wing pointed up. For sport flyers, I think that makes the airplanes fly better. So this has a slight amount of positive incidence on here. The one servo for the elevator, the aileron servos are in the wing. Here, the elevator is shown here. I used a dowel to connect the two halves. And again, no rudder on this model. Save a little bit of weight. I'm going to keep this empty on the bottom. The total weight of this model with the wing is 14 ounces, a little bit heavier than I wanted, but that's okay. If you make yours, these electric motors are a little bit lighter than the gas engines. This was designed for 0.10 gas engines. They were heavy back then. I'd extend the nose another ½ inch or an inch so you have more forward weight for the proper center of gravity. So this is a fuselage here, really nothing super special. And the wing I made using the build a wing in 10 minutes. You can literally build this wing in 10 minutes. So this is a foam board right here. I've covered the top, but you saw in a previous video how the spars are the 3/6" spars in here. It goes together very well. It's just a nice, straight, true wing. Here are the ailerons and the servos for the ailerons, and I'll hitch those to a Y connector to the receiver once it's on place. And again, just rubber bands hold everything in place. That's kind of what it looks like so far. This is a completed real thing. Here it is, a little bit of paint on it, and pretty happy with it. What I would say if you're going to build one from your own is, you notice on the plans from RC Model Magazine, the engine is mounted pretty high up, and it's a 0.10 motor. They're fairly heavy back in the day. The electric motor is a little bit lighter. It just balanced out with this motor here. You might want to add a ½ inch or an inch to the nose to get that motor weight and battery a little bit further forward to help with the balance. But everything worked out okay on this. The wing came in nice and straight. I think the ailerons are an important thing in this model. The weight of the model is about 15 ounces. I would have liked it a little bit lighter. But when you're building with foam board, the weight is built in when you do it. So if you were to build another one, I think with the wingspan of the original models, about 46 inches or so, that might work out a little bit better. I do highly recommend the ailerons. You can see the aileron servos underneath here. I kept the bottom open to save a little bit of weight. This is the elevator servo, obviously here, and no rudder. So I think it's got plenty of power with this motor. With a 3-cell LiPo, plenty of power. So once we get a good day out the RC field, we'll take it for a test flight and see how she flies. So we are back in the modeling shop. This clip was approximately 2 months from the previous clips. Just a bunch of things going on here between the holidays, travel, visits, and so forth. And as I was away, I was thinking about my real thing model, and the wing that I built, I just felt was too heavy. So this is the original wing that I built, and this uses build a wing in 10 minutes method, which I've used on a lot of models. And what you do is you just, as you saw in the video, you just wrap around the foam, put 2 pieces of 3/6" foam together for the foam board, for the spar, and it works very well. Just like the model, I have no dihedral on this. I just kept a flat wing, and I picked 30 inches because 30 inches is the width of the foam board. But this is just a heavy wing. There's nothing wrong with the wing technique of using the building in 10 minutes. I've used it with great success with models like this with my twin engine design. If you look on the end, you can see where the foam goes over with the spars made from the foam board there. This is a lightweight, extremely good wing, but you need a model about this size, I think with about close to a 40-inch wingspan minimum, to make it worthwhile and enough of a chord. This just didn't have it. So what I decided to do was to build a second wing, and this is out of just 1 layer of foam board. It doesn't double over. And what I did was I just creased it at this section, about 1.25 inches back, folded it over, to have a rough shape of an aileron, this will work okay. I could almost use a flat surface on this, I think, but I did this. And I put in a carbon rod here to make sure that it's secure at the joint, because this is more than 30 inches. I've added 2 inches on each side, so you can see that it's a little bit greater wingspan than the other model. That gives it a little bit more surface area. So we haven't flown the model yet, so we're going to try it with this one. I also have installed the ailerons. One tip that I found out as I was building these models, with the foam board for the ailerons, if you put the paint just on one surface like I did here, it'll tend to curl up. So on this one, what I did was I put the paint on both sides of the aileron so it would prevent the curling. What I would recommend, though, for these thin sections like an aileron with a foam board, it's not a good idea. Just use some 1/8 inch balsa. That's the best bet for ailerons or something like this. But for the test bird, I think this will work out okay on this one right here. And this was about 3 ounces less weight on that. So that is what I did for the wing. Let's go ahead and connect the batteries, see the control surfaces and the prop, and then we'll just wait for a good day out of the field and go fly it. We have Annie over for a visit. She'll help with the checkout here. Thank you, Annie. Okay, so here is the model with the wing in place, just rubber bands to hold it on, and we can see, notice that there is not enough clearance for the propeller on this one. When it's at rest, it just barely clears the ground. I've got a pretty big motor on this, and what happens with the gas motor is mounted further up. You're just going to have to be careful with the motor you use and the prop if you do this. Obviously, a hand launch, we'll just have to shut the engine down to idle when it lands. But let's take a look at the elevator. As mentioned, no rudder. There is the ailerons right there. Note, back in the day when this was done in 1973, servos were big, heavy, and very expensive. You would see a lot of 3-channel models with rudder, because if you used a single servo for the ailerons, it was this complicated bell crank system to get the ailerons working. These days, with very inexpensive servos, just put 2 in the wings and they go just fine. And we'll test the motor. There is a 3-cell battery. There's going to be plenty of thrust. So don't worry about the thrust. And we'll check the balance real quick. Let me just turn this off to make sure the motor's not going to pop to life. And the balance works out pretty good with a total weight of about 17 ounces. So there's a balance at about 20-25% back on the wing. So that is our build of the real thing. We'll just wait for a good day out in the field and see if we can take it for a test flight. So we're out here in the field. It's a kind of cool day, 28 degrees in January, but it's a beautiful day to fly. There's no wind. We've got the real thing all set up here, 3 channels with the ailerons, elevator, and throttle. About 17 ounces. So look at the control surfaces here. Elevator, the aileron, and then the throttle. So I think we've got plenty of power. Obviously with the prop will be a hand launch, and we'll go ahead and give it a shot, see how she flies. So here we go with the maiden flight. Just a beautiful day to fly, plenty of power, and the plane just never flew. So here's the first hand launch. It went prop, an immediate turn to the left. I just never really had control. Replace the prop, gonna give it one more try, anticipating that left bank, and we take off. I get a little bit of altitude, but I'm not controlling it. It's starting to come towards me. We just land. And here's that second flight in slow motion. If you wish to take a look at it again, you can see that we did that first turn, trying to level the wings. Not much happening coming towards me, so we abandoned the flight at that time. All right, so you saw that the flight did not go well. The plane just wasn't flying. It had plenty of power, but it was turning. I could stop the turn barely, but I wasn't feeling like I had good control. The plane was coming towards me, so I reduced the throttle, and you saw it kind of crashed on the landing. And so I think that's the way it works sometimes when you do these conversions or foam board designs or whatever. Sometimes it's going to fly well, sometimes it's not. I think overall, I'm not saying the design is bad here. It's just heavy for the size of this model. The original real thing was 46-inch wingspan. I think that would probably have it fly better. The other thing with the regular wing that I used that you saw before, that I kept to 30 inches just for the size of the foam board. I think if this were out to 46, a wider chord, one of the beauties of doing the 10-minute wing technique is it's virtually warp free. There's absolutely no warps or whatever. So I think a little bit bigger size might have worked better. But you live and learn, and that was what happened on this one. What can I say? And what I do with these projects is I cut my losses. If it looks like it's not going to fly well, I just don't continue on that. Just, we had some fun building it, learned a few things, and then we move on from there. So if you try your real thing at home, I would advise making it about the same size as the plans, a 46-inch wing, and again, keep it as light as possible and see how yours turns out.